I'm Alexander Lapropoulos, and my presentation will be about the Central African Republic and how it's becoming a fragile or a failed state. First, I want to talk about the definition of a fragile state. A fragile state is a low-income country characterized by a weak state capacity and/or weak state legitimacy, leaving citizens vulnerable to a range of shocks. Air dependency, weak governance, and protracted conflicts means that the Central African Republic is in danger of becoming a failed state. Based on research inside the country in 2013, more than 6,000 people have been killed since the conflict began, and 2.7, so more than half the country's population, are in need of emergency assistance. The International Rescue Committee, the IRC, urges the international community to move beyond humanitarian aid to resolve the country's conflict. Fighting has also engulfed the Central African Republic since early 2013, when mostly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power in the capital of Bangui, causing retaliation attacks from Christian militias, according to the UN's refugee agency. More than 460,000 people have fled to neighboring states, so like Congo, and 436,000 are displaced internally as well. Claire Bourgois, the UN's humanitarian coordinator for Central African Republic, said in April that the country is in danger of becoming a forgotten crisis and more funds needs to be raised to protect the displaced people and also provide humanitarian support. The UN has asked for 613 million to pay for humanitarian programs in the country. Also, harvests in the country have halved since the fighting started, putting 1.5 million people at risk of food shortages. If the conflict escalates and funding needs are not met, as many as 3.45 million people could face food insecurity by the end of that year. Failed states or fragile states are also very dangerous globally as well, since they bring a lot of mass amounts of people with them who flee from their country. These people want to go somewhere where it's safe, and sometimes the host countries do not have enough accommodations for asylum and do not have the basic physiological needs, so example, food and water and shelter. The Fund for Peace, so the FFP, is a non-profit organization who does research in order to determine which state is highest risk of failing. There are 12 criteria to take into consideration when scoring a country based on its fragility. These are demographic pressure, refugees and IDPs, group grievance, human flight, uneven economic development, economic decline, state legitimacy, public services, human rights and rule of law, security apparatus, factionalized elites, and external intervention. States tend to fall apart since they cannot contain themselves anymore. They could be a weak central government, but usually they do not fail in an explosion of war or violence, but by being utterly unable to take advantage of their society to use huge potential for growth. By ranking states weak or failed, we can get a better understanding on what situation a country or state is currently facing and how people can externally help them. The Failed State Index ranks countries and states very logical since it has different categories of risk potentials. For example, very high alert, alert, high warning, etc. And it goes down the list like that. But the IRC warns that the country is becoming too dependent on aid. Central African Republic health facilities are overly reliant on humanitarian assistance, with over 80% of clinics requiring aid to stay open. Central Africans quoted in the IRC report that asked for putting their country on path to peace rather than for food aid. They are asking international community to disarm combatants so that they can go home to their neighborhoods they abandoned. So when they came to these IDPs, so internally displaced person sites, neither food nor the small income generating activities at these sites will allow them to go home, they said, or they quoted. People are losing out in this country, even though it's one of the most resource-rich places on earth. Landlocked Central African Republic has very rich deposits of diamonds and gold, as well as timber, but little of that wealth has trickled down to its 4.6 million people. The Central African Republic is really close to being a failed state, or it's right now a fragile state, and threatens to spread chaos in the heart of Africa since it's landlocked. The UN appealed for international help to build a modern state, one of peace, security, and stability, where simply living would be good and reasonable. Members of the UN Security Council expressed deep concern at the security situation in the Central African Republic. They're characterized by a total breakdown in law and order. The African Union, France, and the United Nations have finally decided that the situation in the Central African Republic warrants significant intervention. The Central African Republic is a failed state in need of long-term, thorough intervention to address the political, societal, and economic issues that was in the years of the making. Since the Seleka rebel group seized the capital in March of 2013, political authority and the rule of law have completely been eroded since then. The results of these events have been a security vacuum. A security vacuum means when the regulating force is removed and other undesirable force rushed in to replace the stabilizing force, so the Seleka group. These rebels, their Seleka rebels and subsidiary groups, are taking over small pockets or places in the country and using violence, including looting, abductions, rape, and burning of churches and government buildings to assert their supremacy. Meanwhile, the national armed forces and the police have collapsed, allowing criminal enterprises to attack on local populations all over the country. So, in order to begin the process of restoring social peace, the international community will have to do more than send troops and disarm militias. Christians and Muslim leaders are taking the lead of reconciliation, but they lack resources and secure venues where dialogues can take place, where they can discuss things. The international intervention forces also need to support and encourage these societal efforts into a formal democratic political process can be established, and political and societal components of the intervention must also be supplemented with material assistance, since the Central African Republic was already one of the poorest countries in the world by then. And then the quote, "There is just total lawlessness and the civilian population is being caught in the middle," said the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, so the UNHCR, one of the leaders of that. Well, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a nice break, Mr. Green. Ciao.